Hi everyone. Today we are going to record a standalone form service. This service will later be served as an API, which we can use to get data and send data to the server. First, let's look at the form itself. So this is our simple form that we're going to record today. As you can see, this is an order system. We have a login screen. First, let's try to put the wrong credentials. And of course, we're going to get some kind of an error message. We could see this error message is here in the pop-up in the dialog, and also we can see it here in the status bar. This will be important later in this video. But for now, let's put the right credentials here. And after we log on, we can see we have a few options. Basically, we have a list of customers. And for every customer, we have some details and also all of the orders that the customers had made. In our simple service, we're going to do a login and then choose a few of those fields of this default customer that we can see here. And we'll create the service and test it, as we will see in a few seconds. First, I'm going to close the form since we're going to open it through our recorder. I'm going to create a new form service. For this, I'm going into the services pane. Then I'm clicking on this green button where I can choose to create different kinds of services. As you can see, there are a lot of tutorials and videos that can explain each and every kind of those services. But here we're going to look at the form service. So let's click on that. And it's asking for the service name. So we're just going to put a simple name, login and get customer. And here we're going to put the URL which we use to load the form. So I'm clicking on begin. And as we can see, he's trying to load the form. We're going to see the regular dialogues, Java dialogues that we can see every time that we try to open a form. So we just open it as usual. Now, as we can see here, there is a recording bar that is opened up after we clicked on the start. And here we have a few buttons. We're going to look at all of them throughout the videos. For now, it's just important for us to see we have the service name and the amount of time we recorded this far. If we go back to the form, let's talk a little bit about the recording process. So the most important thing to remember is that we want to record only what is actually necessary for our service. What I mean is it's not a good idea to start roaming through the pages, clicking on buttons and just looking into dialogues and fields, unless this is what we want our service to actually do. It's important to understand that the service will actually run the form in the background. So every step we're recording now will be later replayed by the player when we're playing this, recording this service. So we want to be as minimal as possible and just do the exact amount of actions that it's required for our goal, for our service. So as we said before, we want to log in, and then we want to get the data for this default user. So let's do that. Every field that I'm going to put data into will actually become an input field in the resulting service. So let's put the credentials here. And I'm clicking on the logon button. And then I'm going to click on the orders button. And we have a new page. And in this page, as we said before, we have customer details. Now, every field that I'm going to click on, again, if I'm putting input into the field, this will become an input field. If I'm just clicking on a field without putting any new information, this will become an output field. So in this case, let's click on the ID. Let's click on the credit rating and also on the name. So those three fields are going to become an output fields. And that's it. That's what we wanted to do in this basic, very simple recording. So we're going to go here to the recording pane, and I'm going to click on save and exit because we don't want to record any other recordings currently. So clicking on save and exit, and he's actually generating this service for me. So let's see what we actually have. So we have the service name. We can put a description. We have the URL that we use in order to load the form. Here we have an input parameter, right? We have the username and the password. So as we can see, we have a few attributes you can change for every field. So for every field, we could decide whether to change the location. This is more of like usability feature. It doesn't have any influence on the actual service. We can decide if the field is visible or not. We're not going to discuss this feature right now. We have the name of the field as it's represented in the form. In our case, it's main_username_0. And we have the label, which will be the actual field name that we're going to see in the application that we're going to create. And also in the service, after we're going to run it, we're going to get this field instead of this long one and the one that is originally in the form. This just makes it easier for us to decipher the data that we're getting from the service. And we also have a default value, which we don't have to use, but in this case, I'm just going to keep it here. And so this is for the username and the password. And you can see the system has automatically masked the password for security reasons. For now, we just leave it as it is, and we're going to look at all other buttons as we go on with the videos. Here, you could see the output parameters. The output parameters, if you remember, are the fields we just clicked on them without changing any data. So again, we have those names as they are in the actual form, and we also have our labels, the more user-friendly titles that we're going to use. We're not going to go into multi-record right now. This is something to do with when we have a lot of data, such as LOV field. And for every field, we're going to have actions and delete. Delete is obviously when you want to delete a field. In action, we're going to look in a few seconds. Also, for every service that we're going to record, we're going to get 3 fields, which we're getting them for free, you could say. They're not part of their actual service. Well, they're not part of the actual recording, but we are trying to fetch them. So pop-up messages collects all the pop-up messages that are displayed throughout the recording when the service will be played. Status bar messages, as you could guess from its name, is the same as pop-up messages, but just the status bar messages. An error is for a case when you get some kind of an error. Let's say we were timing out when trying to call the service. So this field will be populated by the details of the error message. Mock response is another pane which we're going to use. It's like more of advanced use when you want to put some data that we're going to get every time that we run the service, even if we're offline, just for like testing purposes. We'll see this in a different video. And here in the advanced details, we have some more attributes we could look at and change as we go on. But for now, let's just create this service. So now if you go into the services pane, we could see we now have the new service, login and get customer. And let's test it. So I'm clicking on this button, which is test. So here I have all the input parameters of the service, and I can decide what I want to put there. Let's just keep the default values, and let's run the test. So what the system actually did now was to connect behind the scenes to the form and make all of the steps that we did. As you could see, it was really fast, and we got the results that we were expecting. So he did the login, he was able to go into the system, and he was able to extract the ID, the credit rating, and the customer name, which is exactly what we expected to see. And we didn't get any error or any pop-up messages or status bar messages. So this is good, but let's say that we're testing this service, and instead of putting the right credentials, we're going to put something wrong. Let's try to run this test and see what we get. So in this case, as we could see, we were not able to go into the system, to go into the form. We were blocked, and we actually got the same pop-up message and the status bar message, sorry, we saw while running this service earlier and putting the wrong credentials. So in this case, if someone runs this service without the right credentials, he's going to get those pop-up messages and status bar messages. There is one last thing I would like to address in this video, which is the success element. So every time we are running a service, we're going to get this JSON object, and it has a parameter, an attribute, sorry, called response. After response, we're going to get whether the service was successful or not. In this case, it says that the service ran successfully, but we know this is not true as we got this pop-up message. Let's go back into the service. And I'm going to edit the service. If I'm going here to the output parameters, as we said before, we have some actions we can change for every field. So let's take the pop-up messages and click on the actions button. So we're going to say, when is the validation of the service is going to fail? So we're going to tell the system what are the cases, what are the user cases or the cases for which this service is going to fail. For example, we're going to say that if pop-up messages contains a value, well, let's say if the pop-up messages is not empty, if we have any kind of a pop-up message, we're not expecting this to happen. So if we do have some kind of a pop-up message, that means that the service had failed. So in this case, we're going to say that if the response is not empty, hence we do have a pop-up message, then you need to fail the service. We're clicking on save, and I'm saving this service. And now let's try to test it again. Again, I'm going to change the credentials to something which is invalid, and I'm running the test. And as we can see now, we got the service execution is finished with errors. Now we got a false value here. And the reason is, why do we get an error? Because pop-up messages has a non-empty value. So as we could see in this video, that was like an introduction, how to record simple service and how to configure its validation process so we could decide when is the service successful and when it doesn't. We're going to look at a lot more in the next few videos. Thank you.